Hey there, handy friends! Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again. So today we're going to be talking about a more uncommon way to harvest your worm castings. Now, first thing I want to show you is something really cool about worm castings.
This photo shows soil mixed with percentages of worm castings. Proof, castings encourage a much faster growth.
The next step is pretty simple. You're gonna take a piece of paper and make a base layer. You can use corrugated cardboard. I have just unbleached paper here, or you can use newspaper. Try to keep it real low on the colored ink. And then here we have a spray bottle full of rainwater. A really easy way to get quick results for your worm castings is to grind up your food before you put it in with the worms. So shouts out to Wild Woodland Witch, as she offered me her hand-me-down Vitamix, and I'm really excited to use it for multiple different things around my house as well as my worms.
Here I am adding simple compost items that worms love, such as fruits, vegetables, coffee grounds, eggshells, tea bags, and don't forget to add the water when you're blending it up. Since I haven't fed my worms in a few weeks, they're really going to love this snack.
So I've got the layer of paper down, and I'm going to put some fresh coconut coir down. And this is one of my favorite things to use for my worms. They love it. They feed on it really well, and as you can see on this side, you can't even really tell what it is by the time they get done with it. So I'm going to put a layer of that down, and then I'm going to moisten that really well. I usually have it wet. As you've seen in previous worm videos, I usually use the brick of coir, and when you're breaking it down, you have to wet it really well in order to get it to expand. And so it holds water very well. That's another good thing for the worms, is that the worms like to stay moist, and this coconut coir will help them stay moist and have a nice environment. And I will show you what happens if it gets too wet here in a minute, but you shouldn't really have to worry. It should be like a damp sponge. And even though this looks a little bit too wet now, once you mix it up and everything absorbs from the paper beneath, it's going to be just fine.
Now I'm adding my food scraps all blended up. If you don't have a Vitamix, you can use a food processor, or you can just cut up your scraps with a knife, as you see me doing here. My worms are really going to love this sweet apple. This is really going to help get my worms moving to this side of the bin. I'm keeping my food centralized to make it easier to cover up.
As you can see, I've saturated my leaves really well, and I had some grass clippings, so I just added a few of those too. And this helps the worms get the microbes that they need in order to really thrive. This basket, it was coming really handy. It's just $1 at the Dollar Tree, and I use it a lot in my gardening and in my worm farming. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to cover my food here with these leaves, and this is gonna help keep the smell down, right? As well as the microbes. And lastly, I've torn up some of this recycled paper that I showed you before and kind of made my own bedding here in it. And so I've also wet this. I prefer to use rainwater. So that's what I normally use unless we're running really low. I give my worms the nutrients from the rain, and that really helps. And so this is going to be just a really simple way. You know, I can still see a little bit of food, so what I'm going to do is add a little bit more of this coir. You don't want to see the food. If you see the food, you're going to smell it. On and on. I'm really picky. I do not want to smell it. So therefore, I add more of that, and since it's not wet and it's too dry, I'm going to go ahead and mist it down again. And then lastly, I'm going to go ahead and put this layer of paper on, and my worms are going to migrate over the next few weeks to this side of the bin. And I'm actually going to point out that this is the side of the bin that has the tap on it. Wet it a little bit more, put my bedding on top. I'm gonna add a little bit more bedding. That's not quite enough. You wanna kinda like have a thick layer on top. Probably could even use a little bit of this old bedding and get away from it. A little cheat. Doesn't have to be too wet. But the bedding also helps keep the moisture in. So that's what you want. And then underneath I want to show you that I do have a drip bin. And so that right there is worm tea. And it took me quite a while to really understand what worm tea is and how it works. But it's pretty much just when my bin gets too much liquid in the bottom, then I end up with this. And this is something that I clean out periodically, and I'm planning on doing a video on how to clean your worm bin. And when I do that, I'll show you more about this worm tea, but it's really nice to have for indoor plants that don't really get the nutrients from the rain. And so the newly bedded area here is going to be on the side of the bin with the tap. So that's how I'll keep track, as well as this. I'm just going to leave the bedding here, and I don't really need to put any bedding over here on this side because I am trying to get my worms to come to this side. All right, so it's been about 2 weeks, and I'm going to go ahead and open my worm bin up and show you. I did switch this around, so I do have my castings that I'm harvesting on this side and my newly bedded area on this side that I hope the worms are in. So excuse me, I'm in the light a little bit, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you exactly what's on this side, which is the side I'm gonna harvest. And I'm also going to show you how I use my sifting method, and hopefully we won't be sifting out too many of these worms. They're all on this side that we're going to keep with the brand new bedding. Go ahead and take the castings and put them right on my compost sifter. And there's a few other videos I have about harvesting worm castings, as well as a little bit about our compost sifter, how we made it and what we use it for. So this is a really simple way for me to pretty much sift through all of this and make sure that I get all of my worms so that I can use all of these castings and keep all of my worms in the worm bin. So I'm gonna go ahead and scrape these out into my sifter, and then I'll show you how to sift it. Worm castings are harvested out of the bin. There were a few left on the bottom that I did pick out by hand. I found about 4. And then I'm gonna go ahead and use my compost sifter. Give it a good shake. And all this paper that's on the top is fine. It's fine to go ahead and use as your castings. And really what this is doing is helping me find the worms that are still left in the pile. So obviously they didn't go horizontally like they should have, or I wish they would have. And then there I see an egg. So I'm gonna go ahead and put those on the other side of my bin. And this is really more than a lot of people do when they're harvesting their worm castings, but I'm still growing my worm farm, and I really appreciate them and I like to keep them in this bin. And so I really go the extra mile to sift my worms out and get them back in my bin so I can continue to utilize their castings until I grow my bin to the exceeding size, the maximum size. So that's the great thing about worm farming is they will grow to the size of your bin capacity. So the bigger your bin, the more worms you're gonna get. They will have enough babies to fill that space up maximum. There's another one and another one. So that's a really good thing about starting small with the worm farms is you really don't have to pay for more worms after that. You can just either separate them into another bin or expand the size. So another great tip about having worm farms. So all in all, I found around 10. Got a feisty one. Did you see that? It jumped right out of my hand. But so sometimes they get really distraught about being in the light. So I'm gonna get him into the bin, and under he went. But worms, they're pretty fun, and I plan to give you a worm tip with every video that I do, so make sure you stick with me. You can see I'm separating the paper out, and this is just gonna help the rest of my castings kind of seep through while I'm giving it a good shake. Trying to keep those over on the side so I can make sure I got all my worms out of here. And then this is still really good compost. It looks like I got all of my worms out of here. This is really just a couple of some random seeds from the melon I gave them, as well as some paper, some soggy old paper. So I give my browns to this compost here, and some eggshells, of course, because your worms have gizzards, so you gotta keep them with the grits. So a little bit of coffee, because you don't want too much coffee, it gets too acidic. And then my eggshells. Eggshells we use are from hard-boiled eggs, and so that way we don't have any salmonella in here. We don't have to worry about that raw egg. We eat a lot of hard-boiled eggs around here. And I did put this tarp down, so then when I harvest these, I can just dump them right into where I need rather than have to shovel them out of this wheelbarrow. So if you like what you see, please give me that thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel for more amazing worm videos. And stay handy, friends.